The pen was cold in my hand. Not from the temperature. It was warm in the hospital room, despite the snow tapping gently at the window, but from the weight of what it meant. A signature. Just a name. Mine. The paper in front of me was titled Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare. Beneath it, my son Gregory stood with a hand on my shoulder, smiling too gently. "Just sign, Mom," he said. "It's just in case. You've been forgetful lately." Forgetful. I stared at him, at the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Gregory had always been the smoother one, my golden child, the one who charmed teachers, glided through interviews, made people believe in his certainty. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't foggy. I was watching. I'd been in the hospital for 2 days. Just a bad fall. My ankle was sprained, not my brain. But ever since I got here, he'd been circling me like a polite vulture, offering to handle my prescriptions, answering questions the nurses directed at me, talking about long-term decisions I hadn't agreed to make. And now this. "You're 67, he said, his voice low and reasonable. "You don't need this kind of stress. Let me handle the heavy stuff." He leaned closer, and that's when he said it. "You don't get to decide anymore." Just like that. As if I'd quietly expired when the calendar turned on my 6th decade. As if my thoughts no longer counted, because they were inconvenient. I looked down at the form again. There was no emergency, no diagnosis, no court order. Just Gregory, trying to wrap my life up in legal ribbons so he could hold the leash. I set the pen down slowly. "No," I said. Calm, clear, solid. His smile faltered. "I'm not confused, Gregory," I added. "But you've just made your first real mistake." And I meant it. Because he had no idea who he was trying to silence. They always say memory fades with age. But some things never leave you. Like the sound of the store bell jingling when I opened the general store at 6 a.m. Sharp, 6 days a week. Or the way my fingers used to fly across the old register, punching in prices faster than the scanner could catch them. Or how I kept every receipt in handwritten ledgers. Not because I didn't trust computers, but because I trusted myself more. I was never confused. After Gregory's father disappeared into the Alaskan backcountry one October and never came back, it was me who kept things running. Me who raised a child while managing inventory, paying invoices, chopping firewood, and shoveling snow out of the loading bay in -20 degrees Fahrenheit weather. I remember scraping together enough to buy our first snow machine outright. Cash, no credit. I remember standing in front of that town council meeting with my spine straight, arguing to keep the local mail drop after they'd tried to shut it down. I remember my numbers, my years, my choices. So when Gregory sat across from me in that sterile hospital room and spoke to me like I was slipping, like I was some ghost of who I used to be, I knew better. This wasn't concern. This was a setup. The words he used were rehearsed, soft enough to sound caring, but firm enough to box me in. And it wasn't the first time either. Lately, he'd been calling more, asking strange questions about my medications, about bills, about whether I had made any changes to my will. "Just checking in," he always said. But it wasn't checking in. It was checking boxes. He didn't see me as the woman who held our family together for 4 decades. He saw me as a signature, a liability, a problem to solve. That was his mistake, because I still had my mind. And now I had a reason to sharpen it even more. It was past midnight when I crept into the study. The old floorboards of the house still creaked in all the same places. I didn't bother turning on the overhead light, just a little desk lamp in the corner. Its soft amber glow spilled across the dust like a secret being kept. This was the room I hadn't touched since before my fall. Gregory had been in and out of it lately, claiming to be tidying and helping with paperwork. That alone was enough to set off warning bells. He hadn't cared about this room in years. Not until I landed in a hospital bed and became confused. But I remembered something he didn't. The drawer, the bottom left one, the one with the worn brass handle that stuck if you didn't know how to tug it just right. Years ago, I'd stashed important things in there. Papers I didn't want shuffled, misplaced, or stolen. I reached beneath the drawer lip and found the small key taped to the underside, exactly where I'd left it. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the surge of knowing, and I unlocked it. Inside, beneath a pile of old tax returns and a faded photo of Gregory and me from a summer fishing trip, lay a thick envelope. I opened it slowly. My living will, my advanced medical directive, my durable power of attorney, signed, notarized, and in my name. Not Gregory's. Mine. Clear. Legal. Ironclad. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. These documents weren't just old papers. They were proof that I had planned, that I had thought ahead, that I still had control. He had no idea they existed. He thought I was vulnerable. He thought wrong. I placed the papers in a fireproof folder and locked them in the portable safe I kept behind the coat closet. Then I turned off the light, closed the study door, and went to bed. I slept well for the first time in weeks, because I knew something Gregory didn't. I was still 2 steps ahead. I've known Lana at the pharmacy for over 20 years. She watched Gregory grow up, used to slip him lemon drops from the counter when he'd come in with skinned knees and a scowl. She was the kind of woman who knew your dog's name, your niece's graduation date, and the side effects of every pill in your cabinet. So when I walked in that Tuesday afternoon to refill my blood pressure medication, her face told me everything before she said a word. She didn't greet me like usual. No smile, no small talk. Just a quiet, cautious look over her glasses. She leaned in slightly, speaking low enough that the customer behind me couldn't hear. "Your son was here yesterday," she said. I blinked. "Gregory?" She nodded. "He asked to adjust your dosage. Said the current strength was making you confused. Tried to show me a document giving him authority over your care, but..." She hesitated. "But?" I asked. She glanced down, then back up. Her voice dropped even lower. "It didn't look right. Sloppy signature. No official stamp. And something in his tone just didn't sit right." My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not from fear, but fury. "He left in a hurry when I asked for a confirmation call from you," she added. Then casually, as she rang up my refill, she slid something across the counter beneath my receipt. A folded sticky note. "Call me. Privately." I nodded once. Pocketed it. Gregory was escalating. Fast. He wasn't waiting for courts or conversations. He was trying to rewrite me, one dose at a time. But he hadn't counted on the people who'd known me longer than he'd known power. I walked out of that pharmacy a little shaken, but far from broken, because now I had another ally. And Gregory had just made his second mistake. When I called the number on the sticky note that night, it wasn't Lana who answered. It was her daughter, Dana. She'd taken over the pharmacy 2 years ago when Lana retired, though I still called it Lana's place, out of habit. Her voice on the line was calm but firm, and before I could say much, she cut right through the small talk. "Mrs. Halberg," she said, "I know what's going on." I paused. "You do? You probably don't remember, but I took your bookkeeping class at the high school. You filled in for Mr. Hampton the year he got sick." I did remember. She sat in the second row, always color-coded her ledgers. Sharp girl. "You taught me how to see patterns," she continued. "And what your son's doing. It's a pattern. I've seen it in patients with elder parents. They test boundaries, they isolate, they manipulate. It starts with meds and mail, then it moves to money." Her words landed like ice, sharp, clean, and honest. "I wasn't sure at first," she said. "But when he tried to change your dosage and the signature didn't match your old file, I knew." I didn't speak for a moment. No one had said it aloud yet. That word. Gaslighting. But now it had a name. Donna didn't stop there. "I've got a contact for you," she said. "Works with the Elder Law Project out of Fairbanks. Free legal aid for seniors dealing with abuse or coercion. I can vouch for her. She helped my aunt get out from under a guardianship mess a few years back." She gave me the name and number. Madeline Rhodes. Legal advocate. I wrote it down slowly, the pen steady in my hand. I'd been gathering pieces for days. Documents, instincts, fragments of truth. But now I had a bridge. A link from suspicion to action. "Thank you," I said quietly. Donna's voice softened. "You taught me to trust numbers over feelings. But in this case, your gut was right." We hung up, and I sat alone in my kitchen as the wind howled outside. The kind of cold that wraps itself around the corners of the windows in this part of Alaska. But inside, for the first time in a while, I wasn't cold at all. I was in the hallway, folding laundry, when I heard the front door open. It wasn't the sound that startled me. It was the voices. Gregory's low and cheerful, putting on his best professional tone. And another voice, unfamiliar, polished, a woman's. I crept to the edge of the hallway and listened, pressing my back to the wall like a child sneaking out after curfew. "This is the main room," Gregory said. "Big windows, lots of natural light. And over there's the kitchen. It's all still functional. Just needs a little updating." My stomach dropped. "I thought you said she still lived here," the woman asked. Gregory chuckled, soft and dismissive. "She's not really living here anymore. Not mentally. It's only a matter of time." I stopped breathing. This was my home. The house I'd built after the general store turned a profit. Every nail, every shelf, every bit of insulation tucked in by my own hands or hired with hard-earned cash. The kitchen cabinets were the same ones I'd painted pale blue after Jack left. The back bedroom had been Gregory's once, until he demanded a bigger room and I gave him mine. And now he was walking someone through it, like I was a ghost already passed on. I peeked around the corner. He didn't see me. Too busy pointing at the baseboards and mentioning solid resale potential. The woman scribbled something on a clipboard, nodding. I backed away silently. Heart pounding, laundry forgotten. He was trying to sell it. Without me. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. And in that moment, I realized something painfully simple. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about safety or care or concern. It was about control and cash. Gregory had written me off before the ink had even dried. But what he didn't know, what he refused to see, was that I was still here. and this house still had a fight left in it. I found the paperwork tucked inside a folder labeled Medical Archive in the filing cabinet Gregory had claimed he'd cleaned up last month. It was a copy of a cognitive assessment form, stamped by a clinic 2 towns over. The date on it stopped me cold. 3 months ago. It said I had early-stage dementia. My hands trembled as I scanned the rest. The boxes were checked with thick, rushed strokes. Disoriented. Forgetful. Lacks awareness of current events. But I hadn't even gone to that clinic. Had I? And then, like a crack of lightning, it came back to me. That strange appointment Gregory insisted I go to. Said it was a routine follow-up for insurance purposes. He drove me there, talked the whole ride, filled out the intake form to save me time. I barely spoke during the visit. The doctor was distracted, rushed, asked vague questions, most of which Gregory answered for me. I'd chalked it up to poor bedside manner, but now I saw it for what it was, a setup. He had staged that visit to manufacture a diagnosis he could then wave around as justification for every boundary he crossed. The dosage change, the documents, the real estate agent. It was fraud, plain and cold. I drove myself, quietly, to Dr. Elkins, a neurologist in Fairbanks Donna had recommended. I sat in his office for nearly 2 hours, answering questions, taking memory tests, drawing clocks and repeating phrases backwards. No one interrupted. No one filled in blanks for me. At the end, he closed his folder and looked me in the eye. "Your cognition is sharp," he said. "I see no indicators of impairment, dementia, or cognitive decline." I swallowed hard. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," he said. But someone wanted it to look otherwise. I walked out of that clinic with more than a clean bill of health. I walked out with proof, and a fire I hadn't felt in years. Gregory wasn't just lying to the people around me. He was trying to erase me, my autonomy, my memory, my name. But now I had the truth, in writing, from 2 doctors. And the only thing stronger than deception is documentation. The cold in Alaska is constant, but some kinds of ice take longer to feel. The kind that forms between a mother and her only child. The kind that builds up over years of small lies, subtle shifts, and quiet betrayals. But now, that ice was beginning to crack. Donna met me on her lunch break, with a folder full of dates, receipts, and typed summaries. She'd been documenting quietly ever since the dosage incident. She slid it across the cafe table with steady hands and eyes that didn't flinch. Then came Madeline Rhodes, the legal advocate Dana had connected me to. She arrived wearing wool gloves and a steel resolve. We spread out every piece of the puzzle on her office desk. The falsified dementia diagnosis. The recording I'd made of Gregory's real estate pitch to the agent. The original living will and durable power of attorney. In my name. A copy of the pharmacy's written refusal to change my dosage without direct consent. And finally, a written statement from my physician in Fairbanks confirming my cognitive clarity. Madeline examined everything quietly, methodically. When she finally spoke, it wasn't with pity, it was with precision. "This," she said, tapping the diagnosis, "is guardianship fraud." She moved her finger to the real estate notes. "This is attempted theft by coercion." Then to the medication records. "Medical deception and attempted chemical restraint." She leaned back in her chair, locking eyes with me. "You're not just being manipulated, you're being targeted." But now we fight back, with facts. It felt strange sitting there as the victim and the witness and the strategist all at once. But I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Because every paper Gregory had tried to bury, every lie he told in a calm voice, every signature he forged in my name, now lived inside an evidence file. And the law was beginning to thaw. I've learned that silence is sometimes more powerful than any confrontation. That evening, Gregory came by under the pretense of checking in. He brought soup I didn't ask for and advice I didn't need. I kept my face neutral, nodded when expected, and smiled just enough to keep him from seeing the storm building behind my eyes. Before he arrived, I slipped my phone into my cardigan pocket and hit record. I hadn't planned on doing it. It wasn't like me. But something told me this visit wasn't about care. It was about strategy. His, not mine. And I was tired of letting him speak unchecked. He moved around the house like he owned it, commenting on furniture placement, murmuring about resale angles. Then, as I rinsed dishes in the kitchen sink, he stepped into the next room and called someone. He didn't know I could hear him. Didn't know I was holding my breath just on the other side of the archway. His voice was low, fast, irritated. Yeah, she's still here. She's slowing down, forgetting stuff. I mean, she remembers the big things, but I can make it look worse if I have to. I froze. She's got papers somewhere, I think. But if I get that POA in place legally, none of that will matter. It's about timing. A pause. Then, I need that house. You know what it's worth now? If I can list it by May, I'll be out of debt. The words dropped like lead. He wasn't just trying to help himself. He was planning around my erasure. As if I were a bad tenant in my own life. Someone to be removed with a flick of paperwork and a notary stamp. When he hung up, I walked back into the room, calm as ever, and offered him a second helping of soup. He declined, said he was just passing through, and left not long after. The moment the door clicked shut, I pulled the phone from my pocket and stopped the recording. I played it back twice, each word as clear and sharp as ice breaking underfoot. The next morning I emailed it to Madeline. The subject line read, Exhibit A, in his own words. He didn't know it yet, but Gregory had finally told the truth, and I had it saved in stereo. You never really know who's watching, especially in a town like ours, where most people keep to themselves until something really matters. Mabel Kettler lived 2 cabins down, tucked behind a line of spruce trees so thick you'd think the place was abandoned. Most days you'd only spot the trail of smoke curling from her chimney. Folks in town still whispered about how she used to be a game warden, one of the best. Retired now, but her instincts never dulled. She knocked on my door just as the first real snow of winter began to fall. I hadn't seen her up close in years. Same parka, same direct stare. Her boots tracked snow across my rug like she owned the ground. I heard what your boy's trying to do, she said without preamble. I didn't answer right away. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was factual. Like she was logging an incident in a report. I saw him pulling papers from your mailbox, she continued. More than once. My heart clenched. You're sure? Mabel gave me a look like I'd just asked if snow was cold. I may be old, Ellen, but I don't mistake my own mailbox for yours. I saw your name on the envelopes. Saw him shove them into his coat like he was pocketing a candy bar. She paused, then added, You weren't home either time. I felt sick. Gregory had been intercepting my mail, probably looking for statements, documents, anything that didn't match the version of reality he was trying to create. He's laying bricks for a lie, Mabel said. But I can knock 'em down for you. And then, quietly, almost like it hurt, she added, I'll testify. It stunned me. Mabel didn't even show up to neighborhood potlucks. But now she was offering to stand in front of a judge and speak truth on my behalf. I asked her why. She shrugged. I spent my life watching predators circle the weak. Thought I was done with that. But I won't let your son treat you like prey. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Not just hope. Back up. The courtroom in Anchorage was smaller than I expected. No polished oak benches or grand marble columns. Just plain chairs, dry heat, and the faint hum of an old radiator working overtime. It felt more like a waiting room than a place where lives were decided. But I wasn't here for comfort. I was here for clarity. Gregory sat across from me at the respondent's table, suit ironed, hair perfect, hands folded like he was waiting for applause. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a red blouse, kept whispering in his ear and nodding. They expected me to stammer, to fold, to cry. But I didn't. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. I didn't plead, I proved. I read my statement slowly, evenly. No dramatics, just facts. That I had been misled into a medical exam Gregory manipulated. That he attempted to fill and alter prescriptions behind my back. That he falsely claimed I was mentally unfit in an effort to take control of my home. That I had audio of him confessing intent to make it look worse. And that I had multiple witnesses, including a retired game warden who saw him tampering with my private mail. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. But I watched the judge's jaw tighten with every word. And when I finished, I reached into my folder and handed over everything. Medical clearances, the original POA, Donna's records, Mabel's statement, and the transcription of the recording. The judge didn't say much. He just nodded and took the folder. Gregory shifted in his seat. For once, he wasn't smiling, because this wasn't just a mother talking. This was a woman with evidence, a citizen standing her ground. And though the courtroom was cold, the truth I'd carried in, quiet and heavy, was beginning to burn through the frost. There was a moment in the courtroom, just a flicker, where I could see it in Gregory's eyes. The assumption that after all this, even if he lost his grip on power of attorney, even if he got a slap on the wrist, the house, the estate, it would still be his someday, because he was my only child. Because who else could it go to? That was his last blind spot. After the hearing adjourned, I sat down with Madeline and pulled out one final envelope. It was older than the others, the edges soft from years of being handled. My original will, notarized the year after my brother Michael passed. Gregory never knew about it. No one really did, because back then I didn't trust myself to change it right away. Michael had been listed as my sole beneficiary for years. He was the one who helped me build the store, the one who watched over Gregory when I worked nights, the one who never asked for anything but always gave everything. When he died unexpectedly, I couldn't bring myself to rewrite the documents, not right away. Grief clouds judgment. And to be honest, a part of me hoped Gregory might grow into someone worthy of being listed next. But he didn't. And now I had. 2 weeks before the court date, I updated my will. Gregory was removed entirely. Instead, I named a small community trust, dedicated to supporting elder women facing coercion and abuse in isolated regions like ours. Madeline filed it that morning. They never saw it coming. And when Gregory found out, it wouldn't be in some dramatic courtroom gasp. It would arrive by certified mail. He'd hold that paper in his hands, expecting a windfall. And realized that in trying to take everything early, he lost everything for good. Because I may have waited to update the records. But not anymore. They saved their last move for the final hour. Gregory's lawyer stood up slowly, like a hunter who still thought the prey was limping. She adjusted her blazer, paced a few steps, and turned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Halberg," she said, "at your age, would you say your memory is as sharp as it once was?" A few people in the courtroom shifted in their seats. I could feel Madeline tense beside me, ready to object. But I lifted a hand to stop her. I looked the woman straight in the face. "I may forget what day it is," I said calmly, "or where I left my glasses, or whether I added sugar to my tea." A pause. But I remember betrayal. Her face twitched. I remember the sound of my son's voice when he said, "You don't get to decide anymore." I remember finding the forged documents in my own house. I remember every appointment I was misled into. I remember every name, every date, every corner of my own home that he tried to take from me. I leaned forward just slightly, my voice steady but firm. "And I remember, love, what it looks like, what it felt like, which is how I knew when my son started choosing greed over it. I wasn't the one losing my mind. He was losing his soul." The courtroom went still. Gregory's lawyer lowered her gaze. Even Gregory didn't move. There are kinds of memory that no clock or calendar can take from you. Not age, not trauma. Truth lives in the blood. I sat back down, pulse steady. They could question my prescriptions, my signatures, even my mental sharpness, but not my pain. And not my clarity, because the woman they tried to erase still remembered everything that mattered. There wasn't a gavel slam, no grand declaration, just the judge clearing his throat and saying, "Based on the evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Ellen Holberg." That was it. But in that moment, it felt like the ground beneath my feet shifted, like a glacier finally gave way to sun. He continued, voice even, deliberate. "All powers previously claimed by Mr. Gregory Halberg are hereby rescinded. Control of all medical, financial, and legal decision-making remains with Mrs. Halberg. The forged documentation and false diagnosis are now under review for criminal investigation." I heard the words, but they didn't register right away. Not until the judge looked me in the eye and added, "You have your life back, Mrs. Halberg." I sat very still. Then, slowly I nodded. Madeline placed a firm hand on my shoulder. She had already filed the emergency restraining order. It was being processed by the clerk while the hearing wrapped. But Gregory didn't stay to hear that part. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His lawyer tried to pull him back down, but he shook her off. Red-faced, jaw clenched, he glared at me with something between disbelief and rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Then he stormed out. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the damage he'd tried to do. Only ego, cracked and exposed, fleeing the light. I didn't look away as he left. I didn't shrink. I just sat in the stillness as the courtroom emptied, the cold finally lifting from the air around me. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't someone's dependent, or burden, or target. I was Ellen Holberg, and the ice had finally broken. I didn't go back to the house. Not to stay, at least. I visited once, to pack my things, to walk the halls one final time, and to say goodbye not to the structure, but to the version of me who lived there. The woman who waited, who explained, who hoped her son would choose better. That woman deserved peace. So I gave it to her. I bought a cabin just outside Talkeetna. 1 room, plus a loft and a little kitchen. Nothing fancy. Wood stove for heat, shelves for my books, a porch that creaks in the wind. Quiet enough to hear your own thoughts echo off the trees. The first morning I woke up there, I didn't check my phone. I made tea. I let the kettle whistle. I let the silence hold me. Not like a cage, but like a coat. I adopted a rescue dog too. A mutt with long legs and a crooked ear. I named her June after the month I finally took my life back. She follows me everywhere, snores like a freight train, and growls if anyone gets too close to the mailbox. I started writing again. Not for anyone else, just for me. A journal, a pen, and a cracking fire. I write down what I remember, what I survived, what I never want to forget. Some people told me I should have kept the big house, that I'd earned it. And maybe I had. But what I wanted wasn't walls or square footage or a staircase I no longer needed. What I wanted was air, and the right to breathe it without permission. This cabin gives me that. Every day I open the door, feel the cold on my face, and remind myself. I didn't start over because I had to. I started over because I chose to. It started with a blog post. Madeline's niece ran a small community site. Just local stories, announcements, recipes. She asked if she could share my story. Anonymously at first. I hesitated. Not because I was ashamed, but because for so long I had been quieted. I wasn't sure how to raise my voice again. But in the end, I said yes. A week after the post went live, the letters started coming. Typed, handwritten, folded into worn envelopes and sent from towns I'd never been to. Nome, Bethel, Sitka, Haynes. They tried the same thing to me. My daughter called it help. It was control. Your story is mine. Dozens of women, some younger, most older. All of them carrying the same heavy silence I once held. Some had escaped it. Some were still trapped inside it. One woman in Kotzebue wrote, "Reading your words was like someone turning on a light in a room I'd lived in for years. I read every letter, cried over most of them. Then I began writing back. Not to fix things. I can't do that. But to witness. To say, I see you. You're not imagining it. You're not broken. You're not alone." The blog post became an article. The article became a panel talk at the community center. I stood in front of 20 folding chairs with June curled at my feet and told her my story out loud, for the first time, in my own voice. I didn't tremble. Afterward, a woman with grey braids hugged me and whispered, "I haven't used my own bank card in 3 years, but I will now." I had never set out to be anything more than free. But now, somehow, I had become a flame others could see through the fog. And I wasn't turning it down. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be standing behind a podium in Anchorage, speaking to a room full of lawyers, doctors, and judges, I would have laughed you right off my porch. But there I was, wearing my best cardigan. Notes in my hand, heart steady. June tucked in the hotel room upstairs, likely snoring into a throw pillow. The conference was about elder protection and legal reform. I wasn't the keynote. I wasn't even supposed to be there. But Madeline had slipped my story to one of the organizers, and they called the next day. "We'd like you to share what happened," they said. "Not as a lawyer, not as a doctor, as the woman it almost happened to." So I said yes. The room wasn't large, but it was packed. Attorneys in press suits, healthcare professionals with lanyards, a few judges I recognized from the Anchorage courthouse. I began the way I always did, not with statistics or legal jargon, but with that day in the hospital, pen in hand, and Gregory's voice in my ear. "You don't get to decide anymore." And then I walked them through it. The forged diagnosis, the altered prescriptions, the staged mail theft, the property walkthrough with a real estate agent while I was still living there. But I didn't tell it like a victim. I told it like a teacher. Because once upon a time, I taught kids how to balance ledgers and track patterns in numbers. Now, I was showing these professionals the human side of patterns. How abuse can wear the mask of care. How silence is often the loudest alarm. When I finished, the room was silent. Not out of politeness, but out of attention. And then they stood. Some clapped. A few wiped their eyes. One judge approached me afterward and said, "You've just rewritten my idea of what elder abuse looks like." That night, I didn't celebrate. I just sat by the window with a cup of mint tea and watched the frost crawl up the glass. They try to silence me. Now I speak. And they listen. The indictment came quietly. No news cameras, no headlines. Just a formal envelope from the state attorney's office, delivered by courier and left on my cabin's front step in the snow. Gregory Holberg. Under investigation for elder abuse, medical fraud, attempted financial exploitation. And, as it turned out, forgery in a separate business deal from 2 years prior. It seemed I wasn't the first person he tried to rewrite. Just the first who stood up. Madeline called to confirm it. They traced 2 forged signatures in a real estate transfer he was part of. Same handwriting, same sloppiness. "It's unraveling, Ellen." I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just sat at my table with a mug of coffee gone cold and stared out at the trees, bare and still. Gregory had built his world on false documents and softer lies. He thought charm could outpace truth. But truth waits. It waits in filing cabinets, in recorded calls, in notarized pages, and in the memories of women who refused to forget what was done to them. I hadn't seen him since the courtroom. Word had spread. Most of the town knew what had happened. Some avoided me. Others quietly nodded when we passed on the street, like they were ashamed they hadn't believed me sooner. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was what I finally had: distance. As the frost melted off the cabin windows and light returned to the valley, I took one long breath in. Not to celebrate, but to exhale the weight I'd carried. Not everything ends with justice. But this one, it came close. The wind howled outside like it always does in late March. Shrill through the trees, rattling at the edge of the old stovepipe. But inside, the fire cracked quietly, and the kettle steamed soft against the silence. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in my thick wool cardigan, a mug of chamomile in hand, and June curled up near the hearth. She twitched once in her sleep, chasing something in a dream. Maybe a rabbit. Maybe peace. The journal lay open in front of me. I hadn't written in a few days. Not out of avoidance, but because sometimes peace doesn't need narration. It just needs living. But tonight, I felt the need to put it down, to carve something permanent out of all the passing days. So I picked up my pen and wrote. They said I didn't have the mind to decide anymore. They called me confused, fragile, dependent. But the truth is, I never stopped knowing right from wrong. I knew it when the paper slid across the table. I knew it when my name was twisted to serve someone else's greed. And I know it now, sitting here in the warmth I chose. I didn't lose my mind. They lost my trust. I paused, letting the words sink into the page like footsteps in snow. The fire popped. The wind shrieked. But neither shook me. Because the truth has a quiet kind of power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It sits, like I do now, steady, warm, and unmovable. I put the pen down, closed the journal, and held the mug closer. The woman they tried to silence? She's still here. Still thinking, still choosing, still burning, softly, steadily, like a quiet fire that never went out. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with a notebook balanced on her knee and a pen that clicked too often. Her name was Lily, a social work student gathering stories for a community memoir project. She'd driven all the way from Anchorage on a slushy road just to sit in my cabin and sip peppermint tea. The stove hummed beside us. June lay at her feet, tail twitching each time Lily adjusted in her chair. She asked polite questions at first. Where I grew up, how long I'd lived out here, what I missed most about running the general store. But then her voice softened. What saved you? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room. At the scarred wooden table, the row of mismatched mugs, the old journal tucked neatly on the shelf. I thought about the courtroom, about Dana, about Mabel, about Madeline's hand on my shoulder. And yes, even about Gregory. I thought about the fire that hadn't burned me, but had taught me just how warm resolve could be. And then I smiled. They forgot one thing, I said. I remember who I am. Lily looked up from her notepad, blinking. They tried to take my name off papers, off decisions, out of conversations. They made their plans, forged their signatures, whispered their doubts. But through all of it, I never forgot myself. Not once. I leaned back, feeling the chair creak beneath me. I'm Ellen Holber. I built a life with my hands, raised a child on my own, kept a business alive through 3 recessions and 4 feet of snow. My mind isn't perfect, but it's mine, and it was never broken. Lily scribbled something quickly, then looked at me again. That's the title, she said. That's your chapter. I gave her a nod. Let it be. She packed her bag and thanked me. June walked her to the door, tail wagging, and when the car pulled away, the cabin was quiet again. But this time the silence didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a story someone else would remember now, because the woman they tried to erase was still here, whole, unbroken, unforgettable.